Hi, welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how you can use Zod schema validation for different scenarios. The first scenario is going to be in the context of a form and you're validating form fields, so basically form validation and how it can be used for form validation and how it makes things simpler to use for form validation. And in the second scenario, we'll be looking at using it within an API route in Next.js and validating request bodies that come into a request and making sure that that fits with our schema and it fits to the types that we're expecting. Now, what is Zod? Zod is a schema validation tool that can be used to validate schemas and also types, and it is much more useful than using TypeScript because TypeScript is static and it doesn't really check things at runtime, whereas Zod checks things at runtimes and checks types at runtimes. So that's why we want to use Zod. And in this tutorial, I'll give you a few examples of how we can use it in different scenarios. So without further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. So let's roll the intro first. Okay, so to start off with, I've created a simple form without using Zod and just purely using TypeScript just to show you the value that Zod offers and how much simpler it makes things. So as you can see in our component, I've just added a simple form that just captures the user's full name and the user's email address and also a date picker, and then a submit button on the end. Now, one of the things that you notice about this form is that we're also handling errors as well. Any validation errors, we're showing them below as well for all of the different fields. And to sort of handle the different validation errors, we've just passed them into the register function as the second argument, and just told it that it's required. And for the email, we've passed in a pattern that includes a regular expression, and for the other the sort of date picker, because we used a different package, we had to use the controller component, and this controller component also provides us a rule as well, and the date picker sort of just does its own validation. And if you're wondering, we're using the React date picker library. So this is it. It's a pretty simple form, and we're using use hook, and we've passed in our TypeScript type as well. So we've typed out form. We've given, as you can see, the full name, a type, and the email and the date, all types, and then we pass that in to the use form hook. So if we just go over to our form and just see what it looks like for a minute. If I submit the form now, as you can see, I get all of the validation errors. However, if I fill out the form and I just put in like a bunch of numbers for the full name, and just put in sort of like any sort of like email with the correct format for the email, and just put in any sort of date, as you can see. However, once we use Zod, you'll see how much easier it is. So okay, so let's use Zod now and see how much simpler this will be. Okay, so let's use Zod now. So the first thing we're going to do is import Zod. So actually, before you do that, you want to make sure that you've downloaded the packages as well. So to install like the date picker package, you just do React date picker, and to install Zod, you just do React hook form as well. Install that as well, and just do npm install Zod, and then hook form resolver as well, and you should be good to go. Okay, so let's import Zod. So if I just do import, let's import Zod first, and then just do import Z from, and then just do Zod, and it's that simple. And then next we just do import. We also want the Zod resolver as well, so let's do import Zod resolver. And if I just hit enter, it'll auto complete that for me. So now what we want to do is we want to define our Zod schema. So rather than using this type, we can just get rid of that now, and because we're going to be replacing that with the Zod schema. So if I just do const schema, and then that will be z.object, to tell Zod that we want this kind of object schema. So the first thing that we want is full name, and then we want that to be z.string, and we want that to be a minimum length of 1 character. So if I just put 1 in there, and then we want the error message to say full name is a required field. Or just full name is required will be enough. And yep, there we have that. And then next we want to do the same for email and date as well. So I just do email, and then z.email, sorry, z.string, as we want it to be a string first, and then we just do dot, we have an email type as well. So this makes it much simpler. Rather than having to write our own regular expressions, Zod will check whether like the email is of like a valid format, which really helps us. And then we want to add our error message in here. So we want to say invalid email address if they enter an invalid email address. And then we want date as well, and then we do z.date, and in there we want to add our error message as well, and we want to say required error, and then we just put down date is required, spell that right. And there we have it. We have our Zod schema now. Okay, next we're gonna infer our type from the schema, and as you can see, my autocomplete code tool, Amazon Q, is ought to give me a suggestion. But so I'm just going to type this out without using that. So we're just going to do type form data, and then we're just going to say z.infer, and then I'm just going to click tab because I'm lazy. So okay, so what we're doing right now is we're just telling TypeScript to infer our type from this schema that we have up here, so we don't have to create our own type, and it can just be inferred from there. And next what we want to do is we want to pass our schema into the use form hook. So to do that, we're just going to pass it in through this as an argument. So I'm just going to create a new object inside of here, and then I'm just going to say resolver, and I'm just going to say dot, and then Zod resolver, and then we're just going to pass in our schema. And there you have it. And now on each of our forms where we had the validation, we can safely remove this now, because Zod will handle this. So anywhere inside of the register where I'm passing in an argument for validation, I can sort of remove that. And here as well I can remove this rule as well. So if I save now, if we go over to application now, as you can see, if we submit without putting anything inside of the form fields, we'll get the same validation errors. And if you just put anything inside of the inputs, the full name, will just put anything, and then for the email I'll just put something that'll also pass the regular expression that Zod is using behind the scenes. And the date, I'll need to put in like an actual valid date, because it says date is required. So if I just select on the date picker, as you can see, once you submit, the errors are gone, the validation errors are gone, because our form is now valid. So this is how you'd implement Zod validation within the context of a form. Next, let's move on to how you'd implement that in the form of an API route in Next.js. Okay, first let's create our API route. So to do that in Next.js, we just create it in the side of the API directory, and then I'm just going to create a route.ts file in there. Actually, let's create another directory inside of that and just call it users. Doesn't really matter, you call it anything, and just put our route.ts file inside of there. So the API route will be /API/users, and that's what the API route will be. So in there we're just gonna create an API method. So I'm just gonna export async function, and rather than get, we're just going to do post, so we can use the request body. So let's get the request body first. Okay, that's very nice of the AI tool. Let's just auto generate that for me. So so inside of here we need to validate the data here if needed. That's correct. Yep, an example, use yup or Zod. So we're going to be using Zod validation and passing it like this. So let's do that. First we need to just sort of create a schema as well. So let's create the Zod schema for this. So I'm just going to do const user login schema or something like that. So I'm just going to say user login schema. Yep, and so in here we're just gonna actually we need to just import Zod. So import, yep, like that, and then we're just gonna say z.object, and the first field that we're gonna get is email and password. Yep, so if I just press tab, as you can see, we're just gonna do one for email, and we're just gonna do that of type email, and then password, and then we want that to be a minimum length of 8 characters. Sorry, I don't know. I can't get my words out today. And then let's validate that. So the first thing we're going to do is just validate our request body to see if it actually is the correct body. So if I just remove that, and so what we want to do is get the result, and then get the schema, and then just say pass, and then pass in the body. And if it doesn't match that, what we want to do is throw a 400 error. So let's do that. So if result.success, so it's not result.success. So if that is false, what we want to do is throw a 400 error. So what we're going to do is we're going to say invalid format rather than invalid data to give the user some more information, and then inside of the error they will see what the reason for the error is, and we want to throw a 400 error, but we want to use next response instead of this response. So if I just use next response, and I have to import that. Yep, and so there we have it. So we can test it out in Postman now. Okay, now we're in Postman, and I am going to try and test the endpoint. So I've got a URL here, so it's /API and then /users because of the file structure. And if I change this to a post request, and then in the body, if I go over to raw and then change the text to JSON, and if I just sort of expand that a little bit to give myself like a little bit more space. So now what we're expecting is an email and a password. So for the email, I am not going to follow the email convention, so I'm not going to follow the email structure type, so I'm just going to make it anything. And let me just use double quotes instead of single quotes. And then for the password, I am going to try failing that as well by not including password. So let's see what our API response is. And as you can see, it gives us a response. So we get a 400 response, and then we get validation errors, invalid string, and invalid type. So we get some feedback from the endpoint, which is good. So if I just make the password, put that in some double quotation marks, password, and I just make that a few characters long, send. We still get the invalid format for the email. So if I just make that look like an email, at and then add a dot. As you can see, now we have a 200 successful response, and as you can see, we're receiving our data. So I hope that video was useful, and I hope that you learned a few ways that you can use Zod in Next.js. So please do like and comment and follow for more. Thank you. Bye.